Hi, everybody. It's Mary Rowe from CUI. What a gorgeous picture that was, that holding slide of Mohkínstsis, Calgary, with Mohkínstsis meaning the elbow, where the place where the elbow and the Bow River actually form an elbow. That's the Indigenous name of this place. And I'm sure that picture had been, the colors have been heightened, but did you all look at it? Did you think, boy, our city looks pretty good? And there's a crane there, and there's the river there. Anyway, thanks everybody for joining us at City Talk. We've just had an extraordinary week. We've been in Calgary from the beginning Monday morning through here to now. We have another couple of sessions after this City Talk, but we've learned so much, and it's been such a diverse, rich conversation. I just don't quite know how to start, but I'm so appreciative that I have my colleagues here who have been participating in these conversations, and they may have in fact helped us set some of them up, and they can relate to the larger audience that comes on to City Talk. Some of the highlights, some of the things that have been flagged, some of the priorities that have been identified, some of the challenges that we're sharing collectively, CUIs and the connective tissue businesses we've been saying all along, and this experience of us immersing ourselves in a community and trying to get a sense of the variety and the diversity of issues and challenges and opportunities is wonderful. Toronto is where I happen to be this morning today. It's actually a mild day here, which we're appreciative of because we know it's not going to last. And I know there's snow on the ground in Calgary. Toronto is the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewas, and the Haudenosaunee and Wendat peoples, home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples from across Turtle Island. We have a treaty, the two treaties actually that touch on Toronto, Treaty 13, which is with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty signed with multiple Anishinaabe nations. We have struggled here at CUI over the last several months through COVID to come to terms with the legacy of colonialism and how that has repeated and to exclude and marginalize not only historic populations that are from here and draw their ancestry from here, but also people of color, people with different kinds of disabilities. Basically, how have we continued to, in the way we build and make cities and manage them and structure them and finance them, how those continue to be excluding, and how do we come out of COVID with, it's not like we didn't all know that, we had a sense of it beforehand, but now it's just so right before our eyes when we look at those heat maps to see where COVID is being felt most directly. It's in those neighborhoods that have not benefited, shall we say, from the best of urbanism. In fact, they've benefited from some of the worst of urbanism. And we appreciate too that we happened to land in Calgary this week, and we were in Edmonton last, at a time when the coronavirus is really ravaging Alberta. And in fact, I think you have the highest per capita incidence of COVID now, which is just a tragic statistic to have to share. So all the more reason for us to be appreciative of you taking the time this week through these various meetings. And now on a Friday, as you are coming to terms with the new lockdown requirements and all the pressures that will putting on your constituencies to take time. When we first created City Talk, it was early, about April, I think. We had a hesitation, though, that we knew that millions and millions of Canadians were engaged in frontline service, saving people's lives, keeping people safe. And was it really the right time to talk? So we've struggled with that, but we also appreciate that we do need places, safe places where we can learn from another, where we can share the burdens that we're struggling with, maybe find some new approaches, new answers. And so that's what our work at CUI has been focused on through the pandemic period, and why being with you this whole week has been just remarkable. And we've appreciated the extent to which reconciliation is infusing so much of the journey in Mohkínstsis and all the different First Nations that are part of your community there. So the Siksika, the Piikani, the Guyana. How did I do, Tim? Help me with that one. Guyana. It's Stina, the Nakota, and the Chiniki. And I will rely on my colleagues to correct my pronunciation. It's been fascinating for us to hear the differentiation between the Blackfoot First Nations communities and then those that were actually signed to Treaty 7, and also how that informs your regional perspectives as you talk about the challenges and the assets that you have that are remarkable in the region, and also how that translates into opportunities and, as I suggested, issues that need to be reconciled and addressed. We're also appreciative of the university, the School of Architecture, Planning and Landscape, SAPL. They're a co-sponsor of this session, and we've been in conversation with them a bit beforehand, and we had a session with them last evening about the way in which that institution is trying to be supportive and contributing to whatever the future evolution of Calgary is. We're also heard from people from the downtown sector, people from the new economy, people from the old economy, people from social services, people from arts, people that are entrepreneurial, people that are working on poverty, people that are working on equity. So it's really been a rich, rich week for us. And I know that I'm going to benefit now from the kinds of summaries, and all the rest of you, all you City Talkers, are going to benefit from hearing from these folks directly what they're focused on. As everyone knows, we record City Talk. It gets posted afterwards on the website. We hope that you'll send all your friends there. We also have a very active chat here, which I'm hoping people will contribute to. And if you put questions up in the chat, sometimes other chatters respond to those questions, but also I can take some of it and feed it back into the group here. Just remember, what goes into the chat stays in the chat. So because we post these things, and these are, I think we all need to remember that this is a remarkable moment in our lifetimes where we're being afforded the opportunity to really examine what we've been doing right, what we haven't been doing right. And as we emerge from this extraordinary moment, how will our lives change? How do we want them to change? And how do we want our city and our city environments to change to be more the kinds of city environments that we want and that are inclusive for everyone? So with that beginning, I'm going to turn first to you, Tim, if I could. And also everybody's bio, as you know, appears in the chat. So we don't do long bios, but it would be helpful if you just said, I'm Tim, I work at the Calgary Foundation, that kind of thing. And we'll start with you, just a little overview from your perspective about pressing issues, challenges, and opportunities that you see in Mohkínstsis.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Mary. And just by way of a deeper introduction, I'll say, my name is Tim, and I'm originally from the Blyde-Kaina Reserve. It's a part of the 60 Gates at the Blackfoot Confederacy. The work that I do is for a settler-created philanthropic organization called the Calgary Foundation. And for the past 4 years, I've been focused on taking a systems change approach and trying to find ways to mobilize the work of reconciliation and decolonization. And so just your opening reflections about the things that are emerging sort of more locally, I think could be also said right across the country. There's this interest for sectors to find novel ways to mobilize this work of decolonization and reconciliation. And so that has been my focus for the last 4 years. And there is no guidebook on how to do this. I'm definitely in a space of experimenting. I do know that there is a big piece of knowledge and context missing from the very infrastructures of all settler-created organizations. And so that's sort of been a focus of my approach over the last 4 years and continues to be. I feel like this work is generational, and as a generation, that's the tough task that we are faced with. So just in a nutshell, that's sort of my focus of my work. And really happy to be here as well.
Yeah, you know, I was brought up short when I first took this job. I've been working in the US. I'm Canadian, but I've been working in the US, and I gave a speech in Vancouver, and an Indigenous woman came up to me and said, cities are a colonial construct. And it hit me between the eyes, you know. I was so gobsmacked because I think of cities being 4,000 years old, but I heard her and then engaged in a learning conversation. I tried to learn what the perspective was that she was bringing. And as you suggested, this settler soft infrastructure that we have around how we make decisions, how we invest, how we structure neighborhoods, it's so deeply ingrained, isn't it? And so I can appreciate, and then you're there in a funder role, so you have some power, but you're having to, I'm sure, navigate a new relationship with communities that doesn't reinforce that power. Say that must be tricky.
Well, I think that there is a mental model that exists for the world of philanthropy. Like the mental model is where we have love of humankind, we're giving to the charitable sector. And I sort of parallel that to this iceberg, this cultural iceberg. And at the very top and at the surface is this mental model. But the more you begin to lower that surface, you'll begin to identify these leverage points and these gaps that exist for certain populations who are not quite benefiting from the generosity of philanthropy, settler-created philanthropy. Now, I'm really specific when I say settler-created philanthropy because philanthropy has been a part of Indigenous paradigm of thought and culture. It's just practicing the value of generosity and giving in a different way. It's sort of giving without any restrictions or justification that we see so much in settler-created philanthropy. The other thing that we are really focused on is this growing trend that the Indigenous population is the fastest growing segment in all of Canada. And so as an organization, we are taking that very seriously and we're preparing ourselves for that growth. And this is sort of a call to action that I would give to all of my colleagues on this call, is to really consider what that growth in population means. It means a couple of things. It means that there's going to be this untapped human resource of Indigenous folks entering into the workforce in urban centers. But also, if you're a part of a sector, a human services sector, for example, that requires you as a system to shift and change. I think gone are the days when we should expect Indigenous people to increase their capacity. I'm asking the question, what are you as an organization and sector doing to shift and change your practice that is more inclusive, is more welcoming and provides a sense of belonging for this growing population, which, by the way, is going to be a really young population growing into our...
And you're already the youngest city in Canada, your average age. It's something that I'm just going to throw out some of these little things that we've heard this week for people across the country who may not pay attention to that kind of stuff. You're the youngest. You also have the highest per capita income held by a younger population. You also have, you're, I think, the second least equal in terms of economy or income. I think I'll go to you, Beth, next at United Way, who can probably comment on that. I know that there's certainly, I don't know if it's widening, but there is a situation you have with a lot of people earning a lot of money and a lot of people who aren't. And I'm just, before I go to you, Beth, I'm just going to plug that if Jamie could put into the chat, there is, of course, you can read, of course, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission for Canada, which is good reading all the time to reread. But there's also a specific report to Calgary City Council called The White Goose Flying, which has a list of calls to action, and I'm sure there are other resources that maybe some of our other panelists might want to put up into the chat so people can see the particular Made in Calgary thinking around reconciliation. Beth, can I go to you now in terms of the ways, because you're on the corporate philanthropy side as opposed to private philanthropy. Can you give us your perspective?
Sure, and hi everyone, happy to be here, and thank you for the question, Mary. And in fact, we're involved in both businesses, corporate philanthropy and individual philanthropy. Right. And Tim's absolutely right. We're also a settler organization. United Way in Calgary has been here for over 80 years, and United Way as a movement globally is about 100 years in practice. And we are, like Tim and his organization at the Calgary Foundation, have been on a very aggressive internal journey around what it means for us to consider decolonizing our own constructs around how we think about philanthropy, how we think about our own privilege in this space, and how we consider our community investments as a result. And in fact, it was one of those initial studies and reports that we did where we took a look at, how the agencies and organizations that United Way funds and supports are supporting vulnerable populations, including racialized populations, Indigenous people, et cetera. And there's disproportionate representation in both mainstream organizations and in Indigenous or Black-led specific organizations around, certain folks being, grossly disproportionately represented, and those are structural reasons. Those are social structures, economic structures, where we see a growing gap. Mm-hmm.
Disproportionately not represented.
Sorry, disproportionately not represented. Yes. So, and there is a growing gap. There certainly is a significantly growing gap where there are, significantly more people who have access to resources and significantly more people who don't. And our economic reality, which I know Jason will speak to, is troubling. The transition is difficult, right? That transition that we're involved in here is very difficult and very challenging on the funding side. Just to give you some context here, across the country, we're looking at a $4 to $6.2 billion reduction in philanthropy. That's a big number. 69% of nonprofit, philanthropic, charitable organizations across the country are experiencing a decline in revenue. And 1 in 5 nonprofit or charities across, regardless of its arts and culture, social services, are not going to make it. Now those are jobs, and those are also services. And when we look at the situation in Calgary, certainly COVID has revealed those disparities in terms of services. And here's a really troubling fact. These curve lines are going in exactly the wrong direction. There are way more people who need supports and services who have never needed supports and services from social services in particular before. And yet we have a precipitous decline in philanthropic revenue to actually, fill in that gap. And it has been filling in that gap, and philanthropy won't be able to fill in that gap. There's just no question. So we do need to think about, structurally how our sector is going to need to reconsider ourselves and our relationship, not only to philanthropy, but our relationship, to government, and what does that look like, and where are those conversations happening? And they're really important.
That's interesting. Do you think we're going to see a period of time where the sector becomes more dependent on public funding? And the statistic you're reading, Beth, just for the benefit of the audience here, where are you pulling those statistics from?
It's actually a recent report that's just being released by United Way Central Canada in collaboration with the YMCA, Boys and Girls Clubs of Canada, and a number of other charitable organizations who are now looking at that data in the aggregate locally. The Calgary Chamber of Voluntary Organizations has done a brilliant report in terms of surfacing and understanding what the local conditions are. The national statistics are just a reflection of what's happening locally.
And it's a complicated thing. I mean, I know people are describing a K-shaped recovery, where people that were already doing well and who are somewhat insulated, they can work from home, they actually are making more money and they're spending less, so they're saving more. And people that were already marginal, already in low income jobs or had precarious employment, are making in fact less. So as you're suggesting then, what I don't know about is if people actually on the upper end are actually hanging on to more money, have they lost the capacity? I know there's an issue around event revenue that lots of national health charities, for instance, rely on. I know this because my partner is very involved with one and reminds me frequently about this, that you don't have bike rides anymore and walks and all that kind of stuff. So that revenue's gone. But if high income people are hanging on to their money, are they just not contributing? Are they forgetting? Or are they, what's that about?
I don't think they're forgetting, Mary. I think that, everyone is, I would say, in a heightened state of anxiety, and people are really, everyone is anxious. Everyone is trying to figure out how to deal with the unpredictable, reality, what's happening now, what's going to happen in 2021 and going forward. What does recovery look like? This is not short-term. This is very long-term recovery. I also think someone has mentioned in the chat, there's actually quite a lot of transfer of interest into, social impact investing. And, we're looking at expanding social impact investing here in our own community in order for us to be able to think about, how we can build a robust system, economic system, social system, cultural system, et cetera, that includes social impact investing. So I think people are also just thinking about, different ways and different vehicles, and timing is as they say, everything. And we're really in a tight squeeze.
Yeah, no, I hear that. And I think these are important trends. I'm seeing that people are having trouble hearing me. Can the panelists hear me? Abby Slater, can you hear me? If I just speak up?
Your volume is a little bit low for me anyway, but.
What that's about, I can scream. I don't know what that's about. Maybe it's just too much zooming is maybe what it is. Okay, I'm gonna go, I'll try not to yell, and hopefully, says some people can hear me. And some people say I'm faint. I'm not faint, just so you know. I'm good. Okay, Jason, can you a segue from Beth then to the economic development perspective, and what you would add to this remarkable structural thing that Beth is saying is coming, or we're in the midst of. Over to you, Jason.
Well, thank you, Mary, and to CUI and SAPL for the invitation. My name is Jason Robero. I'm the Director of Strategy at Calgary Economic Development, responsible for our core research that our team produces, everything from, seizing AI opportunities with machine analytics and data analytics, all the way through to studies on the office market in our downtown, just a wide breadth of topics, including, the economic and social impact of Calgary's newcomers as economic drivers. We've been quite intentional about, expanding the reach of our research. But the other part of my role is leading our community's economic strategy called Calgary and the New Economy. And it's a vision that Calgary becomes the city of choice for the world's best entrepreneurs. And I don't just use entrepreneurs in the very, sort of privileged position of someone in a t-shirt and a very hip sort of environment downtown. I use it in the sense of those, involved in local investing and social entrepreneurship, those spanning all sectors that want to solve really heady challenges, including cleaner energy, safe and secure food, the efficient movement of goods and people, and better health solutions, which is of increasing importance, as Mary noted, with the concerning rise in cases in Calgary, in Alberta. So, we were asked, what's working on the ground and what's not. I think we are well aware of what's not working. And from the economic development perspective, the what's not working can be, I could insert the 11% unemployment rate, which is one of the highest in the country. I could insert office vacancy rates, which are climbing towards 30%. But I want to acknowledge what Beth has talked about, what Tim has talked about. The challenges of what's not working are increasingly the amount of work that we need to do on knowing and unknowing as it concerns reconciliation. What's not working is increasingly the systemic barriers for those of people of color and mixed race who have come to this community and potentially may be dealing with living in a community in some part of this city that gives them less access to economic and social opportunity than others. We talked about, Mary, the stats that you threw out, some of them which are very sexy and things to be proud of, but you've also noted the other side of that around income inequality. And I think what Calgary and the New Economy, this economic strategy that we consulted with 1,800 business and community leaders on, what it's revealed is that Calgary is a city of paradoxes. Calgary, yes, we can take a lot of pride that it is named the most livable city by The Economist in North America, while also acknowledging the statistic you just cited about being one of the leading jurisdictions for income inequality. We can talk about the fact that we have the most highly educated workforce per capita in the entire country in Calgary, but at the same point in time, the ground is shifting underneath us, not only in an energy transition, but in a wave of digitization that has displaced a ton of people who are trying to find their way with very, very high educational credentials. And so I think we can talk at length about what's not working. But from my vantage point, what is working is that we're starting to have conversations that have momentum. This diversification conversation, 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago was, I think, paid a lot of lip service, but it was hard to see the results of. Macroeconomically, maybe, but not necessarily on the ground. Increasingly, we're starting to see people talking to their kids about what companies they're going to work for. And it's not often the bigger players that have played a large outsized role in our community. It is these social enterprises and technology companies that are increasingly hiring bastions of people. And so I think what is working is this call for density in our core, better sustainable urban planning, which we know has created this paradoxical situation where the communities at the periphery of our city are actually mixed use, walkable, and retail having spaces, but created this vacuum where there's suburban existing communities that don't have that level of good urban practices there. What we're seeing is that we're moving forward in I think a much more sustainable way. Whether we can get the, I think, political, economic, and social momentum to make sure that this isn't just lip service as in previous years, but actually turning the corner on building a new economy is what remains to be seen. But I'm very, very heartened with, and working with many of the people on this panel on moving the dial forward in both small and big ways on the items I just mentioned.
Well, I hope you enjoy it, Jason, for the next few days, since I understand next year your life is going to be diapers and walks to the park, taking a year to be with your child, which is a wonderful thing that you always hope every parent can do. Question, you raised this issue about, and then I'm going to come to you, Patti, to talk about, if you can, about culture. Jason, you talked about the spatial nature of growth. And I would say that when the city council approved those 14 new neighborhoods pre-COVID, I think there was lots of speculation about, well, is Calgary actually thinking about intensifying in the core, or is it actually going to continue to be a more spread out, lower density community? And how do you kind of level those two things off? I hear you that we have a big campaign here at CUI called Bring Back Main Street, and we're aware that the potential for local neighborhood economies to come out of this stronger is a hugely important challenge that each of us can have agency in. What then does happen to the downtown? And you had a downtown that was struggling before COVID. You had 400 empty office floors before the virus even arrived. So how do you think, as an economic developer, how do you hold both those things to be true?
Yeah, it's definitely a nuanced one, and I'll just couch this for the record. You're assuming my life is in diapers and night feedings right now. I think this is the only clean suit I have that doesn't have spit up on it. But I think you've raised a very, very thoughtful point around a reference I made earlier around alignment, not only between government and industry, but also the plans that we have. The economic strategy is one roadmap, but we have municipal development target plans. We have a number of frameworks that we need to be able to find the ways to adhere to while striking a balance between needed economic growth and jobs. And the question is, at least from the Calgary economic development perspective, we're not just concerned about the short term, we're concerned about the long term as well. And so while we'll take the influx of, say, new construction jobs or new trades jobs that might result out of this building, what are the longer term consequences, and how can we channel our efforts without boiling the ocean to make sure we're thinking in the long term? And so I think that the efforts of CUI around bringing back main streets and restore the core are certainly a focus for us. And we've actually partnered with the Downtown Association and Patti's organization to create a number of downtown initiatives, including 1 million square feet, which is an accelerator for all of these new ideas to reanimate, create investment opportunities within existing space downtown. So we get that level of vibrancy, we get that level of acumen, but also for the property owners, we get that level of traction. So we make sure that Calgary's downtown isn't choked off from future investment, that they see it as a worthy market to continue investing in, which I think will increase not only the liveliness of a downtown core, but certainly the jobs that hopefully go with it.
I mean, as you say, these are all assets. I mean, the thing is, you have this built environment, you have these buildings, you have this space. It's an interesting question. That's why I want to turn to Patti, because her constituency of arts and culture is all about assets and all the remarkable assets that those folks bring and the mixing of people and place. So Patti, can you give us a perspective from your vantage point in terms of what you think the challenges are? And also, I know that you're a person focused on opportunity, but can you just sort of speak to the balance of all that?
Sure. Thank you very much, and thanks for having us all here today. Just a context piece. I am the president and CEO of Calgary Arts Development. That's the work I do. We are the city's vehicle for investing in the arts and artists on behalf of the city of Calgary, although we hold an arm's length relationship and reach with council to try and depoliticize the investments we make. That said, we also are an arts development agency. So like Jason at Economic Development, or friends at Tourism, or the Chamber, or other agencies, we also see a role in what we call city building. And in particular, from Calgary Arts Development's perspective, we specifically refer to arts-led city building. And I think, Mary, your point about coming from this place of asset rich or from abundance as opposed to scarcity is a great privilege that I get to work in when every day I see the contributions and the way in which artists are contributing. They are our storytellers. This time will be remembered through the stories that artists will tell and express through their lenses, through their eyes and hearts and minds. And so because of that, it's really important to us at Calgary Arts Development that we do our best to include artists at these very tables that are talking about the future, that are looking at ways to innovate. You know, Jason's talking about the 1 million square feet initiative. You know, how can the arts help activate a downtown? How can artists and residents with corporations or retail blocks start to help us all look at our cities, our neighborhoods, our communities in different ways? And given our role, you know, I describe us as being a public agency stewarding public dollars, because the bulk of our investments are made from tax dollars at the city level in support of the public good. And from a public good perspective, I'm very conscious that ours is a role of arts-led city building that is building a city for all Calgarians, not some Calgarians. And I would argue that right now as a city, our systems are such that they benefit some Calgarians. And so as a result of that, all Calgarians don't see themselves inside the systems. They don't see themselves benefiting from the systems as they currently exist. And so for all of us who are on this call today, I don't want to put words in the mouths of my colleagues and peers, but I spend the vast majority of my day trying to figure out how to break that down. As Tim said, right? Whether we contextualize it in the spirit of decolonizing, that in and of itself, if we could do that one thing, that would transform this city. If we talk about it from the perspective of inclusion, right? You know, everybody is using some variation of equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility, or diversity, equity, and inclusion, or equity, or anti-racism, or like, you know, racial equity, or social justice. Like all these terms are now coming up and coming into the mainstream for, I think, a lot of people who don't actually know what that means. Mm-hmm. And for some people where it's very, very fearful. And honestly, I just find in our city right now, I'm a born and raised a Calgarian. As a settler here, I have benefited greatly. And I always talk about how much I love my city. I don't always like it. And right now, I really dislike my city. And so selfishly, my work is about how do I fall in like with my city again? Mm-hmm. And if I can do that for me, I'm pretty sure I can bring others along with us. And I especially feel pretty sure that if we're including artists in that kind of discourse, in that activation, that's the other thing I think we haven't done quite enough of right now. We have spent so much time talking and not enough time doing and acting. And that's what I love. I admire so much about the people on this call. I can point to stuff and say, Karen did that, Jason did that, Tim did that, and Beth did that. And 9 times out of 10, they did it together with other people. That to me is my hope. That's my thin edge of the wedge into what I believe the possibilities for our city can be going forward, because I see people like this who are being exemplars. They are working together, which, by the way, is really super hard, and it takes up way more time, and you can't get nearly as much done as you'd like to when you have to work as collaborators. And I often talk about, I'm kind of past partners and collaborators. I want co-conspirators. I am looking for the people who are going to work stealth, and we're just going to go in.
And politeness.
Yeah. We just got to get her done, folks. And that, Another Calgary thing, right? These are a group of people, and there are many, many more. I recognize a bunch of names on the call who get her done. And if ever there was a time we need to get her done together, it is right now. And I hope that Calgary Arts Development is a part of that kind of effort to figure out how we, kind of move the pieces around to do just that.
Well, I want to come back to when you fell out of love with your city, and you say you really don't, or you're in love with it, you don't like it at the moment.
Yeah, I love my city always. I don't like it.
Or is it something?
Mary, it's that kind of iterative sort of thing, right? So it just kind of, what's that thing? Todd Hirschgott, the boiling frog. You don't know, you put the frog in the water and you turn the water on and it doesn't know that the water is getting hotter and hotter. Right. And so for me, it was like, oh, I'm really disappointed in, I'll just use recent examples. Our municipal politics are a mess. There's so much discord and rancor.
Okay.
There was after the restrictions, our local news does a daily poll, and they said, call in or let us know if you're going to follow the COVID rules during the holidays. 54% said yes. 46% said no.
Wow.
And that was 4,700 people who responded to that survey.
Yeah.
And that was 2 days ago.
So it's that feeling of that there is such, as you say, that there's rancor, that there's dissent, that there's dissonance. And yeah, it's just,
yeah, and I do think what it's translating into, or at least within the small bubble, is people not feeling heard, right? So again, while those of us who have the privilege of getting to be a part of these conversations, there's a way, way bigger group who just don't feel that connectedness, don't feel that belonging. Yeah. And COVID just exacerbated that, because now we're stuck online. If you don't have access to good internet,
you're screwed.
You're hooped. Yeah. And always it's the people on the margins who are, left out.
Yeah. I mean, it's just exclusion made worse, everything made worse. Karen, I want to come to you. You've been very patient there. All your colleagues have been talking, but your focus is on mental health. And we had a very interesting session with the mayor a couple of days ago, which you were on, because you co-chair his community advisory on this. And this is something the mayor has been concerned about before COVID, but I'm only anticipating that you're going to talk to us. And what Patti's kind of getting at too, is that this is just heightened. COVID has heightened the mental health challenges. So can you give us a bit of a picture of what your focus is?
Well, yeah, I mean, I fell into what I'm doing now as a community advocate and working on a mental health and addiction strategy for the city of Calgary. And I had been an advocate my entire life, and that wasn't by choice, it was by design. And, I ended up having a conversation with the mayor and saying, everything's out there. It just needs to be organized better in a more efficient fashion. And I think this is kind of what we're all speaking to. But what's happened is we've been faced with this crisis situation, and everybody has been faced with it. And the flip side of COVID for us is it has been really, it has provided a lot of information in how to better organize and inform us in the mental health and addiction world. And in health, you usually think of it as prevention, promotion, treatment, and recovery. And everybody all of a sudden had to prevent the COVID. And we had to do better promotion, better health promotion. And that's what, the whole concept of well-being and having a good quality of life and instilling hope, that's kind of in the promotion realm. But we started to be able to think about how we could do a city strategy to better inform and better organize and get the people that are typically trying to manage other people that have mental health and natural supports, not go to the wrong service, the wrong, time, the wrong provider, and just have them be more informed and know where to go pre-crisis and just have a better organization of all. But what really came out, I guess, for me is everything we've been talking about how these system practices and policies, that they've really sort of amplified the inequities, however you want to say it. And that we have to use this opportunity where there's this mass destruction, whether it's health, it's the economy, it's whatever it is, and everybody's experiencing this, to make it sort of, as a parent will say, Jason, you'll a teachable moment. And I think we can use this with what everyone's talking about, and how all of these populations can teach people to decolonize and, you know, teach feminism and teach everything that needs to be talked about now, that we have been ignoring up until now, that have informed these archaic system practices and policies that are making these decisions for these people that just are not working. And I truly think that, you know, whatever we're pushing now is really informing us. And I think it's a great chance for opportunity, but it's very, it's not as abundant. And, you know, Beth, when you're talking about people and, you know, what you're faced with philanthropy, you know, this is a time where we've done analysis of what's going into the mental health and addiction world. And I think we need to just do this more efficiently. And we need to think about how it's not a case of needing more money. It's a case of doing it better.
Mm-hmm. And I guess it's a question of where we're going to spend money too. I mean, I think part of my anxiety is we will see a lot of money, stimulus money, that's going to come at rebuilding Canada. And how are those priorities going to be determined? And how do we make sure that local communities, people like you, are actually informing those decisions, so that we don't end up building back the wrong things? One observation I want to offer based on our week with everybody, it feels to me like Calgary does this arm's length, somewhat autonomous, standalone thing that Patti works for, that Jason works for. Feels to me like you do that quite well. That you create, that's not true in every city, right? You create these, as Patti, how did you describe it?
Well, we're called civic partners, and you're right, Mary. It is actually something very unique to Calgary that many other jurisdictions have actually come to Calgary to explore and understand better.
Yeah, I'm interested because I want us to figure out, how do we take the best lessons? How do we build new forms of infrastructure? And I'm wondering if there's an opportunity. The other thing is, you mentioned it also, Patti, the get her done spirit. We've heard that from almost every conversation we've had with people. Every sector has reflected on how many people volunteered for the Calgary Olympics, how many people showed up to talk about solving homelessness, how many people. So it feels as if there's a civic sensibility that you can tap into, eh? Do you see ways in which that could be harnessed even more? You're going to go through a big transition this year. You'll come out of COVID. You'll have a mayoralty situation. There'll probably be transition on your council, I'm assuming. So it's an interesting moment, and your economy is changing before your eyes. Maybe I can go back to you, Tim, in terms of what the Calgary Foundation's perspective is on this as you go through what are going to be an extraordinary number of kind of sequential changes. Okay?
Well, the way I would frame it from the Calgary Foundation perspective is that it's the difference between knowledge extraction and knowledge mobilization in the world of philanthropy, and how we're trying to move the needle so that we're shifting our system that's a little bit more focuses on reciprocity and all that kind of stuff. So for me, the way I would explain that is, and Karen touched on this, that we are teaching a lot, we are learning a lot and all this kind of stuff. And then Patti alluded to city building and all this kind of stuff. So my connection to all of that is, when I talk about taking a deep dive, and when I talk about there's this missing narrative that hopefully, Jason and his sector is realizing that there are deficits and disparities that exist for Indigenous people and people of color, but that we're looking at those economic and social disparities through a lens of history and social injustice. Now, it's one thing to sort of talk about that and to teach, as Karen alluded to. It's one thing to actually put that into transformation. So the way I explain it is, if I'm designing some sort of piece of context that takes participants through a deep dive, which, by the way, I'm actually holding some space next Tuesday on this very topic, is that it's not enough for participants to show up in these spaces and simply increase their knowledge. I think we're past that point. It's definitely necessary and needed to increase your knowledge and understanding, but it's not enough. So for Indigenous people, we have been extracted from since contact happened, extracted from in land, extracted from in resources. The very wealth that this city is sitting on has come off of the lands and the backs of Indigenous people. So we're realizing that, we're reconciling with that. But, what we need to do is sort of mobilize that knowledge. So it's not enough to, so we need to understand the result of that shared history has brought us to some contemporary challenges in these deficit statistics that we know, and sometimes our businesses is driven on these deficit stats. I'm more interested in taking folks through a deeper level understanding of why those deficit statistics exist in the first place. If you're learning and increasing your knowledge just to increase your understanding, you're being just as extractive as anyone taking land or resources. What are you doing with that understanding to move it forward? Are we making more inclusive spaces at leadership levels and tables, at council tables and all this kind of stuff? So history matters, social injustice matters. And this is what I'm trying to say, that generationally, the arts community, the economic development community, mental health, we don't take the time to sort of focus in on what that means. If we were to map the mental health system specific to racial inequality, we would sort of surface so many experiences that would help that sector and people experiencing those barriers move through them a lot more justly, a lot more equally, but we're collectively not quite there. I can understand what Patti's saying about not really liking the current. This pandemic is going to end. We're seeing some hope already, but the systemic racism is going to continue until we sort of tackle that by embedding this knowledge within the fabric of society is sort of what I'm pushing for in economic development, in mental health, in philanthropy, and in the arts, in all of it.
As you say, this is a post-colonial morphing of city building and not about extraction. I mean, we're conscious of extraction at CUI coming in and saying, come on, Calgary, give us your best. I'm very appreciative of the point you're making there, Tim, about this, that the partnerships have to look quite different. So I'm going to go to Beth and then to Jason. I'm interested about these specific calls for action, and because we want Patti to like her city again. I mean, I really appreciate this point that you can feel alienated. So, and people are tired, right? So can I get a sense from Beth and Jason of tangible things that you can imagine could actually start to happen over the next, let's say, 4 months or something like that as we come out of it? Go ahead, Beth.
Yeah, so we've, and thanks, Tim, for that. There are two systems available to us. There have always been two systems available to us as settlers. There's an oral traditional Indigenous system. There is a Western written system. We need to, as part of our decolonial thinking and decolonial, getting it better means that we have to commit to equity, to acknowledging, accepting, learning from each other, and being humble as a settler to understand when I don't know what I don't know, and what proper extraction looks like, what proper harvesting looks like, and sounds like, and acts like, and feels like. We've done a few things at United Way. This year, we started a venture in 2018, actually called the Social Impact Lab, with the purpose of actually bringing people together. People with lived experience, people with policy experience, people with city building planning experience, corporations, philanthropists, people who are running agencies and activities, to actually take a person-centered design approach to solving problems. and to creating new solutions. And, it's a lab. So it means that there's going to be a lot of stuff that's going to fail, but it's absolutely focused on building new action paths forward. Whether or not there are actual products that emerge, I don't know. But here's an example of something we did in July. So we know that COVID exposed the long known reality that Canada has a food security problem. We have a very big problem in our communities all across this country around food security. Who gets to eat and who doesn't get to eat with dignity and with equitable access. So we ran a platform starting in March called Responsible Disruption, where we were bringing in people weekly to, kind of get a pulse on what are people learning week by week by week through the heart of the COVID crisis. And one of the things that we did in July with that information is we held a food disrupt-a-thon. We invited all of the different organizations and players that I was mentioning and said, hey, community, what do you want to do? We have a digital platform which we used called Open City as part of our lab. And through that process, actually thousands of Calgarians participated, and 9 different types of community solutions were surfaced, some of them to partner with existing ways in which we approach food security and food issues in our community, and some which don't at all. Really interesting new ideas. There was one corporate partner that we work with, Imperial, who actually took that idea and ran with it and actually developed a number of other ideas using and leveraging their own employees' skill base and their own new knowledge of what it means to be on land in this place, to think about how they, as a corporate partner, can participate in food security in a really real, tangible way in our community. And these are the types of activities that we're starting to see proliferate, really very, very grassroots. Lots and lots of grassroots efforts that are going on in the community through our own COVID Community Response Fund, where we, in collaboration with our partners like the Calgary Foundation and the City of Calgary and a number of other philanthropic foundations, came together in a Stewardship Alliance. Within 72 hours, mind you, in March, we were able to provide an additional $12 million of funding out to almost 200 organizations in our community between the end of March and the end of July. Those are not federal dollars. Those are local dollars that are coming into our community. So, and all of that knowledge that we gained over the past 6 months are now starting to inform our practices, our collaborations, and our work going forward. We do a lot of work with Tim and Calgary Foundation and others on this call. And as Karen has said, what we are trying to do now is to say, okay, we've learned all this. What's the roadmap forward?
So you were able to catalyze.
Yes.
This is one of those things, Patti, that you would say, you could point and say, Beth started that, so it catalyzed.
Oh, no, I didn't start it. but we're very interested in catalyzing to action, Mary. And that's what Patti says when she says, get her done. Yeah. What I'm concerned about is that the actions won't be joined up, they won't be integrated, and that we'll go for popcorn all over the prairie. And that's really going to dilute our assets, and it will, dilute our strengths, and people will not get the support that they need. And we need to build with people, not for people.
Yes, we're getting that in the chat. Whatever is with us, I hear you. Jason, do you want to comment at all about the Economic Development Act, this sort of system, and the extent to which it can actually have the same kind of catalytic inclusive? And are there tangible things that you can do?
Yeah, I think Tim's points are incredibly salient. And, this means when I took this position 15, 16 months ago, it was coming off of a role that I had sort of informally in the community as an advocate, as someone who spoke out about things that I've seen that I know were harmful, and tried my best to advocate for change. And this seemed like another vehicle to be able to make change happen. But, I'm the son of a guy that grew up in India, grew up in the UK at a very young age, got an automotive technician degree, came to Canada for opportunity because there were labor strikes going on, and was told to sweep floors. That's in our Commonwealth. That has created a scar to that man, and certainly weighed, I think, on our family growing up. So this is real for me. And I think, the scars that Indigenous peoples have faced as well are top of mind. And so when I came into this position, it wasn't enough to commission research that I think had never been done before around the impact of Calgary's newcomers, or reframing them as economic drivers. But it was, how do we move in the space of economic development to make sure that we are matching the on-the-ground reality and learning from the history that Tim so eloquently pointed out. And so a couple of examples are, not just within our partnership with Immigrant Services Calgary, which for the first time has created a common needs assessment amongst all the settlement agencies. And I sit on that guiding roundtable with their CEO, in ensuring that if a talented person comes into the city, they are not lost amidst the cracks between settlement agency or needs serving agency, that they have the opportunity, in their words, to realize their full potential. I played a leading role in helping bring SAIT's new School for Advanced Digital Technology downtown, and a new digital transformation talent hub. As part of it, not only is my responsibility as a K-12 teacher, as part of that, earmarked programs specifically for Indigenous youth, as Tim has mentioned, was a fast-growing population here. How we can embrace indigenomics to talk about the economic opportunity and imperative for us to take this seriously. The NPower, our Opportunity Calgary Investment Fund has made, is about disadvantaged youth, largely about from Indigenous populations. And I say this not to be puffy-chested. I say this because this is the bare minimum now of economic development.
And
the
Jason,
bare minimum.
And Jason, I'm going to now say thanks, and I hope someone will put in the references into the chat, because I'm going to run out of time, and I want to hear from Karen and Patti as well. So anything that people can put into the chat that picks up on the points that Jason just highlighted, on the initiative, that the investment that he brought. Karen, I want to come back to you in terms of everything that you're hearing is actually, I think, about centering in people, in the holistic approach to people. And I'm assuming that that's really the thrust of the mental health approach you're trying to advocate for, yes?
Well, yeah, I mean, the person-centered for sure, but also the collaboration, I think, is the big thing. Yeah, because every example that people have talked about through their own lens is just really, if we can collaborate and we can better design a more efficient system. And also, I mean, Tim, not just educate, but we have to begin to really reinforce how this system of oppression has been, it has just been so prevalent, and it has been at the detriment of so many people. Because what I'm saying and is that my difficulties that I had, and with the population that I was around, I don't think there's a fulsome understanding of how that impacts everything.
Yeah, that it underwrites the whole picture. And
yeah,
I was, before we came to you, before we came to have our time in Calgary, I had been yammering on about my sense that you were a prophetic city, because you had a whole bunch of preconditions and struggles that were just that much further ahead of where everybody else was. And I feel that the mental health challenges that you've been highlighting, we're going to see a wave of this going across the country around opioids, mental health, all the mental health challenges that are going to come out of COVID that we don't even realize yet. So again, you're that much further ahead in trying to build these collaborations and make it about person-centered interventions. And as you say, there's going to be, the resources are going to have to be allocated smartly as we distribute it. Patti, last word to you, I think, about, as you sort of sum up all the things you've been hearing and the perspective that you're bringing in that interesting role that you play with the city, but also with all the advocates around the artistic and cultural community.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, again, as you can see, personified on this call, if you embrace this whole notion of equity, diversity, inclusion, accessibility, however you define it, if you're working to make life better, make the city better for those on the margin who have not benefited from the system, then you are building a city for all of us. Because if it can accommodate those people, then it can accommodate those of us who are already well inside the system. So as people think about that for your own organization or your own efforts, don't think about it as finger pointing or I'm going to lose something. And I just want to quote Verna Mays, as a longtime anthropologist: diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. And then we have another wise person in our community, Cesar Cala, and he added to the quote by saying, and equity is choosing the band. So that's what we're doing here. We're inviting people to the party. We're going to ask them to dance, and we're going to let them pick the band. And by picking the band, you can also scale. Because if you have a wedding, you can have a DJ, you can have an iPod, or you can have the live band. So however big or small, make it work for you and for the circumstances you find. For us at Calgary Arts Development, we're grateful to all of you who are partners with us. We're actually developing a creative economy strategy for Calgary in partnership with ECDEV, but then that strategy ties to an active economy strategy that ties to a learning strategy that ties to a transportation strategy. So that systems piece that Tim spoke of, that we can think at 35,000 feet and we can also be on the ground. That's where I feel like Calgary's going. That's what gives me the hope that I'm going to fall in like with my city real soon.
Well, on that absolutely beautiful note, can I just thank all of Calgary that let us come and dance this week. We heard a whole bunch of different bands and a whole bunch of different music, and I'm so appreciative, Patti. What a beautiful way for you to end this session with us. This is actually the end of CityTalk this year. It's the end of CityTalk 2020, the end of our fall season. And what a treat it's been to share our last platform with you folks. So I want to just thank Beth and Tim and Karen and Patti and Jason. Great rich chat here, lots of resources. As I said, this will all get posted afterwards. And again, just thank you to the people of Calgary for being such a warm dance partners for us to teach us some new dances. And I want to just thank a couple of my colleagues, if I may. Robert Plitt is our CUI colleague based in Calgary, and he's been working with a number of you putting the week together. So, and continues to provide all sorts of advice. He's a regional lead for CUI. We're very appreciative of him. And then the CityTalk production team, which is Lisa, Jamie, Selena, and Benjamin. They have been on all the sessions this week hearing about this, and Jamie particularly runs CityTalk all the time for us. So I just want to thank all, and to our CityTalk listeners and the community out there in the ether that continue to commit with all of us that we want to move to a more equitable, more just approach, a post-colonial city building approach to Canadian urbanism. So thank you, everybody. I hope you have a good weekend, and good luck in Alberta as you cope with more lockdowns. We're with you across the country, and we feel for you. Thanks again, everybody.
Thanks.